Welcome to the lecture series on Indira Gandhi National Open University Political Science. In this session, we are moving into Political Theory Chapter 2 Democracy. This textbook is very useful for the students who are preparing for Political Science Optional UPSC Civil Service exam. In the first session, we will go through the important points from IGNOU textbook, and after that, we will make a general video on this chapter and discuss the topic in a broader sense. So let's begin. In 1992, the world enthusiastically celebrated 2500 years of democracy. A unique celebrations in political ideals are rarely commemorated this way. Modern democracy differs significantly from the democracy practiced in ancient Greece 2500 years ago. So in 1992, the world celebrated 2500 years of democracy. The ancient Greek, there was democracy prevailed, but it has significant difference comparing to the democracy that is practicing today. The democratic ideas discussed here belong to the modern world, but it is useful to note the main features of ancient Athenian democracy, considered the most stable and model from ancient Greece. Here we are discussing about the democratic ideals of modern worlds, but also we are trying to find the main features of Athenian democracy. The word democracy originated from the Greek word demos, the people, kratos, rule, meaning rule by the people. Demos, the people, kratos, rule. Democracy can involve direct rule by the people through personal participation. So, direct rule by the people through personal participation, indirect rule through elected representative. Now, a key difference between ancient and modern democracy is the definition of the people. In ancient Athens, demos, that means democracy, the word demo means people, the participation of people. But in ancient Athens, demos, these people excluded slaves, women and metics. Metics means foreign residents. You know, in India we have a democratic system and all the Indian citizens are eligible to vote. But whether it is woman, it doesn't matter. Whether it is belong to scheduled caste, OBC or general caste, it doesn't matter. All have the voting power. But in ancient Athens, demos, that means there is no participation for women, slaves and metics. Women were excluded, slaves were excluded. Only about a quarter of the population were citizen eligible to participate. So only the quarter of population was citizen were eligible to participate. Despite restriction, direct participation of approximately 40,000 citizens in governance was significant. There was restriction, but there was direct participation of these 40,000 citizens. And if, of course, Athenian democracy, it was democracy. It faced challenges from aristocrat, general and demagogue who tried to seize power. These people, generals, aristocrats and popular demagogue means populist leaders. They always tried to seize power and sabotage democracy. The poor were often described as the mob or the rabble. Mob or the rabble, that is a word with a negative connotation when we are trying to accuse for something like rowdies. So, the poor were often described as mob or the rabble, reflecting social struggle that resonated with the modern democratic struggle. The struggle for democracy historically involved fighting against political inequalities based on birth and wealth. So the struggle of democracy, that is historically, that was against the political inequality. The political inequality is based between birth and wealth. At its peak, Athenian democracy featured direct citizen participation in the assembly that met up 300 years a year to deliberate and decide policies. So Athenian democracy, there was direct citizen participation in the assembly. The assembly met up 300 years a year to celebrate and decide policies. Citizen chosen by a law to serve in administrative and judicial role, ensuring direct involvement in government. So the citizen political. Historical background. Democracy is considered a key institution of modernity, emerging from complex ideological, social, and economic changes. So, democracy is considered it is a key institution of modernity. It is emerging from ideological change, social change, and economic change. In Britain, we are going to analyze by countries. In Britain, these changes were triggered by the Industrial Revolution in the mid-18th century. So, in Britain, the democratic ideals were triggered by the Industrial Revolution in the mid-19th century, and in France and America, political revolution in the late 18th century launched democratic changes. So, Britain, the reason for Industrial Revolution in the mid-18th century, and France and America, political revolution. Britain is regarded as the first modern democracy. So, which country is regarded as the first modern democracy? Britain. After the 17th century civil war, royal absolutism entered. After the 17th century civil war, royal absolutism entered. Power shifted from the crown to parliament, especially the elected House of Commons. So, power shifted from crown to parliament. In parliament means especially the elected House of Commons. Initially, the voting right was highly restricted based on property ownership. In Britain, voting rights were highly restricted. It was based on property ownership. Political power was controlled by coalition of aristocracy and bourgeoisie with peaceful allied competition. There was peaceful allied competition. The allied people were represented, not all people. So, aristocracy and bourgeoisie. Expansion of voting right in Britain occurred mainly in the 19th century. So, Reform Act of 1832 enfranchised upper middle classes. They are also included. Working classes gained voting right gradually due to political struggles and movement like Chartism. Chartism, that means a working class movement in Britain. Okay. So, after this movement, working class also gained political right. By the late 19th century, about 2/3 of adult males could vote after the 3 Reform Acts. So, there were 3 Reform Acts, and 2/3 of adult males could vote. Women gained the right of vote only in 1929. Remember, in Britain, women gained the right to vote only in 1929. So, universal adult suffrage was fully achieved in 1949 with the abolition of plural voting. Plural voting means one person has more than one vote. Based on, actually in democracy there is one person one vote. So in plural voting it means the person has more than one vote based on wealth, the social position. Some person was granted more than one vote. This was abolished in 1948 and universal adult suffrage was accepted. So the history of Britain once more emerged in Britain. This was triggered by Industrial Revolution. After the 17th century civil war, royal absolutism entered. Power shifted to parliament. Initially, voting rights were highly restricted based on property ownership. That was controlled by aristocracy and bourgeoisie. And Reform Act of 1832 enfranchised upper middle classes. Remember, Reform Act of 1832. And working class gained voting right due to political strife and movement like Chartism. So by late 19th century, about 2/3 of the adult males could vote after 3 Reform Acts. So women gained the right to vote only in 1929. Universal adult suffrage was fully achieved in 1948. Now coming into the case of France. In France, the democracy's more radical tradition began with the 1789 revolution. So 1789 revolution was the turning point in French democracy, which promoted liberty, equality, fraternity and popular sovereignty. The Declaration of the Right of Man and Citizen guaranteed personal liberty, freedom of thought, religion, property, security and political equality as universal human right. So, the Declaration of the Right of Man and Citizen that guaranteed personal liberty, freedom of thought, religion, property security and political equality as universal human right, which were the universal human right that was guaranteed under the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen: personal liberty, freedom of thought, personal liberty, freedom of thought, religion, property security and political equality. In 1791, Constitution introduced near universal male suffrage with low property restriction. So 1791 there was introduced to near universal male suffrage with low property restriction. 1795 voting rights were restricted again, reducing voters about to 10,000 wealthy taxpayers. So universal male suffrage was restored after the 1848 revolution, but the woman gave the right to vote only in 1946. Now in the United States, democracy progressed after the Civil War but was initially limited to white men. Okay, there was also democracy was limited to white men. Women, indigenous people and black Americans gained voting rights only in the 20th century. The 1774 Declaration of Independence legally created the United States and introduced democratic government. So, which year? 1774 Declaration of Independence that legally created United States, and there was slavery in the middle 19th century. The American Revolution ended hereditary monarchy and aristocracy, establishing a republic government with a nominal equality. The separation of powers between executive, legislature and judiciary was established to prevent arbitrary rule. There was separation of power between executive, legislative and judiciary that prevent arbitrary rule. Political ideas from lovers John Locke, Thomas Paine and documents like the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and the American Declaration of Independence from the foundation of the modern democracy. So, which were the foundation of, which were lead to the foundation of modern democracy? Political ideas from the lovers John Locke, Thomas Paine and document like the French Declaration of Right of Man, American Declaration of Independence. These all became from the foundation of modern democracy. These writings were also seen as charters of liberalism, which was closely linked to early democracy. Early democratic theory emphasized liberty more than equality, which became more central later. So the levelers of 17th century England advocated radical popular sovereignty and civil liberties, challenged property ownership as basis for political rights. They challenged property ownership as a basis for political rights, supported nearly universal male suffrage but excluded women, servants and criminals. So 17th century the levelers they advocated for radical popular sovereignty and civil liberties, challenged property ownership but supported universal male suffrage but they exclude women, servants and criminals. And John Locke's second treatise on government. The next part we will discuss in the next video. Thank you.